I'll tell you a little bit about myself and why this subject, but if I think about the agenda to teach what I'm going to talk about, it would probably take at least a week. So I'm going to need your guidance and kind of push and pull to tell me where to go. In America, obviously I'm American by my accent. In 1994, I joined a business called Anthropologie when it was doing about $800,000 a year. So it was a shop kind of in the middle of nowhere. And I built that business to about $1 billion in about 8 years. And during that process, and now it's a multi-billion-dollar business, and I became CEO of the parent company, which owned Anthropologie, and was there for just about 20 years. During that process, I was involved with many other businesses that also scaled from nothing to $1 billion plus. How many of you have heard about a business called Tory Burch? No one? Some of you, the women in the room? It's a multi-billion-dollar women's fashion business and accessory and footwear business, and it's really multinational. They have a shop on Bond Street and I think a second shop now. So I was involved with that from the kitchen table, from the ideation for about 10 years until we sold it to BDP in America for about $3.5 billion. I was involved with a business called Bare Essentials. Anyone know what that is? Okay, it's a cosmetics business, and I began with Leslie when it was about a $10 million business, and we sold that to Shiseido for $1.7 billion. That's a multi-billion-dollar business now. And I've been involved with several others. And it occurred to me, I stopped running things in 2012 because I decided I wanted to be a better husband and a better friend and a better godparent and enjoy life before I couldn't enjoy it anymore. But it occurred to me that there were a lot of commonalities in each of those businesses. And a lot of, I'm someone who loves pattern recognition, so I kind of identified the patterns. And I thought to myself, maybe I'll write a book about building billion-dollar businesses. I've been procrastinating, but I do kind of have the syllabus for it. So that's really what this is about today. And I made myself a note. I haven't prepared a speech, but I made myself a note, 5 rules for building a billion-dollar business. So I'll go over those very, very quickly. And then I kind of have 10 of my most important life lessons, and I'll go over those. But ask me questions because you need to kind of tell me where you want me to go. Okay, first rule, operate where there's size of market. What does that mean? Any answers? Chris, what does that mean? Operate where there's size of market. Who knows how big the women's apparel business is? Anybody? Big. Well, you can, let's say in America. Or in the UK and Europe.
70 billion.
70 billion. It's about $1 trillion in each market. So about $1 trillion in America, $1 trillion in the UK and Europe. Who knows how big the mayonnaise market is? He should, you should?
Well, I'm making mayonnaise.
Oh, okay. Now, I don't know the facts, so I'm going to make this up, but it's probably under $1 billion or thereabouts, okay? So, and those are, 2 small examples, but do you want to be playing in a pool, $1 billion pool or $1 trillion pool? And you have to ask yourself that. And a lot of mistakes, I invest in a lot of businesses, and a lot of mistakes that I see people make is trying to build a business in a market where there's no demand. So, why do that? You're going to work hard, whatever you do. You're going to kill yourselves. Be in a market where there's a lot of demand. Okay. Number 2, offer a clear point of difference. So, I went to business school and they teach a concept called USP, unique selling proposition. Anyone know what that means? What? Differentiate, okay? Give people, and by the way, it's not good enough to just be different, you also have to be better. But the more distinctive, if you look at all of the businesses I was involved with, Bare Essentials was the first kind of powder makeup, and it was offered in a time where foundation makeup, where liquid foundation was what women were wearing. And it was the first foundation that was kind of improved your skin when you wore it. Anthropologie, I'd say, was the first kind of lifestyle merchandiser, and the first team that kind of brought art into the retail experience and that made the shop a destination. Tory Burch probably maybe was different in her aesthetic and her kind of origination story. But maybe the what she did was less original. But I think her aesthetic and her origination story was so strong that it resonated with people. But if you don't stand out, you're going to struggle. If you don't stand out, then your product becomes commoditized. Okay? And when you're selling a commodity, it's a race to the bottom. If you can differentiate your product with a strong point of view and branding, then you can charge more for it, and that's how you make money. Okay, so that's number 2. Number 3, make sure the business can make money. I can't tell you how many people I meet where they haven't really thought that through. And how do you make money? First of all, you need to have size of market, so your revenue is big enough. You need to have margin in the product. So I don't know how many of you are business-minded, but the term gross margin is the difference between your selling price and your costs. And in my world, and there are other worlds, my world is kind of the regular price, more premium market, you need a gross margin in the 60s to make money because you have expenses, in order to make it. So if you find yourself, making a product and you're only doubling the cost, and by the way, the cost is not just the materials, it's your time. You have to fully load the cost, and if you're not kind of 2.5 timing the cost, you're not going to have a viable business model. Okay? You have to understand, all of the costs that you need to make that business happen, because business doesn't happen by itself. And again, if you need help, I can go into it. Yeah.
Sorry, can I just ask a question on that?
Yeah.
So when I work with a lot of businesses, they try and get to that at the beginning when they're trying to grow the business. So are you talking about, when it's sort of settled or in the growth stage?
That's a great question, Neil. My 5th point, which we can get to, is capital. Okay, and a lot of you, and I don't know a lot of you, but when I didn't start Anthropologie, but when I built it, I was lucky because it was part of a public company that had deep pockets. So I could kind of create the customer model and wait for it to get profitable. Now, there was a lot of pressure on me. I couldn't wait very long, but I could wait a couple of years. And we probably cumulatively lost $10 million on the journey of becoming a profitable business. But Tory, on the other hand, which is a multi-billion-dollar business now, made money almost from day one. And she had to, because she didn't have a public company behind her. So, it really depends on how well capitalized your business is. And the rule of capital is however much you need, triple it, okay? Because you never have what you need. And probably the number one failure for businesses is undercapitalization. And if you're not capitalized, you got to be really scrappy. I mean, you have to, we used to have a saying, treat every penny like it's a manhole cover. Anyway, okay. So number 3, make sure the business can make model, and I can get into that if you want. Number 4, you got to operate it well, okay? So these are my rules of operating it well. Number 1, the customer is king, okay? It's shocking to me how many people don't start with the customer. I'm telling you, and I've been involved with a lot of businesses that have been successful, and I've been with some that have failed. And inevitably, the ones that fail don't put the customer first. And in my whole career, and I've been doing this for almost 40 years, I never really worry about making money. I always worry about making the customer love us. And if the customer loves you, she'll pay for it. So, what makes a customer love a brand? I mean, the product has to be great, the delivery system has to be great, the price has to be fair, the customer service has to put the customer first. It's a lot of it is about knowing your customer and knowing what motivates her to buy. And some of that you can tell from research, but some of that you just have to tell by being with people and watching people and having empathy with them. So number 1, customer is king. Number 2, the product. I mean, your product has to be good. Okay, if your product is not amazing, you're in an upward battle. Every business I have been involved with that has been successful has hero products. So what do I mean by that? You look at let's look at Vuitton, which is one of the most successful luxury businesses in the world, or Hermes, which is one of the most successful businesses in the world. They may have 1,000 different products they offer, but they probably have 10 products that do 40% of the company's business. And I ran David Yurman, which is a very successful jewelry company in America. It's about $1 billion business now. 60% of their revenue came from 10 items that have been around for 20 years. You become famous for those things. You make those things, it doesn't mean they stay the same for 20 years. You may tweak them and make them better and update them, but you become famous for those things. If you think about your favorite food stores, you probably get 10 foods from those food stores that you just know. You go to Waitrose, you know you're going to get, I don't know, the organic eggs from Waitrose, or the stem broccoli, or whatever. Avocados, yeah, whatever it is. You have to become known for something, because then it becomes part of the customer's muscle memory. And I always say I never worry about costs on products in early when I'm developing them, because you can always engineer a product to a cost so you can make money. If you make the product amazing and there's a lot of demand for it, believe me, if I'm buying 500 avocados, I'm going to get a very different price than if I'm buying 1 million avocados. If I'm buying 1 million avocados, I can work with the grower and get the right price so I can make a lot of money. So you need an amazing product. Operations, supply chain and logistics. Okay, Tim Cook, everyone know who Tim Cook is? Apple, okay? He did not build that business. He improved it, okay? Steve Jobs built that business. Steve Jobs' last contribution to the company was the iPhone. Tim Cook is an engineer. Who knows what an iPhone costs to manufacture? Well, who knows what the new 14 Pro is selling for? $1,200 or more, right? I just bought one. I think it was 1,429 pounds. Okay, who knows what that costs to make? 50 pounds, anyone else?
$100.
$100, anyone else? About $30, so call it, now it's about 30 pounds, unfortunately, but it was about 20 pounds or 25 pounds a few weeks ago. Okay, that's Tim Cook's genius, okay? That company makes like 35% profit. I mean, they basically print money. Okay, so you need a great supply chain and logistics chain. You need to be able to move product from point A to point B, and obviously the production chain makes a great product, great quality, great price. Okay, controls, delivers it at the right time, and the logistics gets it to the customer. How annoying is it when you're told that something's going to arrive in such and such a date and it doesn't arrive? Or how annoying is it when you don't have transparency into the shipping? And all of these things that we've become accustomed to in the last couple of years. Okay, so that's operations, IT, technology. A lot of businesses, and I'm talking about larger businesses now, underinvest in technology. Technology doesn't define your business unless you're a tech company. It enables your business. I mean, I'm involved with Boden now, and we're spending 55 million pounds on new technologies because the company underinvested in technology for years. And they underinvested because it helped them be more profitable. But it wasn't a wise decision for the future, okay? Technologies allow you to understand what's happening in your business. They allow you to look at exceptions rather than everything. And I can go on and on about that if you're interested. Okay, finance, okay? You need to know where the revenue's coming from. You need to know where the expenses are going. You need to know how you're making money. The difference between businesses that grow and healthy businesses and the businesses that fail is return on investment, okay? I'm friendly with a guy named Dan Crown. His father came to America from somewhere in Eastern Europe about 100 years ago with like $50 in his pocket. The Crowns are one of the wealthiest people in America now, multiple billions of dollars. Why? Because he knew where to put that $50. That 50 became 100, the 100 became 200, the 200 became 400, and so on. You have to look, part of what the finance team does is they make sure you're putting the money where it matters and that you're not wasting money. And whether you have money or not, that's important. Okay. Channel, how are you going to sell the product? Most of my background is retail, so I like having a direct relationship with the customer because I can get feedback and kind of figure out how to make my offer better. but you can be a wholesale business. You can have brick and mortar, you can be e-commerce, you can use Instagram to sell, but you have to have a plan as to how you're going to sell the product. And depending upon the price of your product, you need to think about how many doors you need to get enough distribution to build your business. And you have to think about how you're going to manage that. Communications, how are you going to reach a customer? When I began in business 40 years ago, it was broadcast, meaning that you basically told people who you were. There was a screen, and you never showed them behind the screen. And your form of advertising was newspaper, magazine, you had traditional PR. Now, the customers have complete transparency into your business. So you have to operate in a very transparent way. It's much faster. When I started business and I went to, there was a fashion show going on in Paris, it might have been 6 weeks before I knew what was happening in that fashion show. Now I'm watching it on my iPhone real time. But you have to think, how are you going to get to people? Okay. And then last but not least, people. Okay. Now, I don't know why I put people last, because people are the most important thing. I mean, your business is only as good as your people. In the early days of Google, I was fortunate enough to spend some time with their head of people there, who was a people genius, and I learned a lot. And one of the first things, first of all, you have to have, when a company is small, everybody does everything, okay? So there's kind of no clarity. But as a company grows, and there are inflection points, and I'd say the first inflection point's probably 50 million, the next one's 100 million, maybe the next one's 300 million. As a company grows, you have to divide and conquer, because when you're an entrepreneur and the company gets bigger, you can't do everything yourself. So you have to have very clear roles and responsibilities. And I don't know how many of you have heard about a RACI chart, okay? RACI means kind of who owns it, who contributes to it, who has an opinion, but whoever owns it can either take the opinion or not, and who just needs to know, okay? And in a lot of kind of growing companies, I see a real lack of clarity about who owns what. And when it's not clear who owns what, nothing gets done, okay? And part of why you need the strong finance is measurement, because you need clarity as to who owns what, and then the finance team gives you the report card every day. Yes, you made the sales number. No, you didn't make the sales number. Yes, you made the margin. No, you didn't make the margin, and so on. Okay, so first you need an organization that is built for purpose for your company. If you're an apparel company, you may have half of your staff in design and production. If you are an IT company, you're going to have probably 90% of your team working on development. So it really depends upon the kind of business you are. Then you need real clarity what each of those positions do. And one of the things I learned from Google was to build a scorecard. So to say, if I need a designer for jumpers, for knitwear, what are the skills that person has to have to be successful? And I literally, when you interview people, you measure them against that report card. And one of the mistakes that I made when I was younger was that I did this by myself, and I realized, as I got older, that it was better very often to have peers evaluating peers, because they're closer to what it takes to be successful. And also, you can actually measure over time if you're hiring a lot of people. I mean, when I was running Urban, I was hiring thousands of people a year. You can measure who are the successful appraisers and who are the unsuccessful appraisers. And then you have the people who are good at evaluating talent doing more of it, and the ones who are bad, you try to get them better, but if they don't get better, you just don't have them do that, because not everyone's good at everything. So you need a scorecard so you understand what success looks like. You need to give people feedback, okay? In the old days, you used to give reviews to people once a year. The new way of giving feedback is continual feedback. You don't want to wait a year. The business moves too quickly now. So you need a culture where people are very comfortable giving people feedback often, and clear feedback. And then, what most of the businesses I'm involved with now is they have a formal sit down every 3 months, but it's feedback all the time. Culture. I have zero tolerance for passive aggressive behavior. I have zero tolerance for walking out of a room without alignment. I love in a meeting when there's disagreement, because I think diversity of thought actually, typically makes a better outcome, because you make sure you look at something from 360 degrees. But when you leave that room, you agree and you move forward. Now, if you move forward and it doesn't work, you pivot, but you make that decision to pivot as a group. You don't do it independently. Because when an organization works as one, it's like 10 people equal 20 people. When an organization isn't aligned, 10 people is like minus 10 people. Nothing ever gets done. So anyway, that's a big one. Okay, and capital, I spoke about that briefly. You gotta have capital. If you don't have money, then you have to be incredibly scrappy. I talked about Tori. Tori was really lucky. She had 2 key businesses when she launched. One was a shoe. It was a ballet slipper with a kind of an iconic monogram on it. And she did that in a partnership with a shoe company who funded the inventory. So because in an apparel or accessory business, a big part of the expense is the inventory. So she didn't have to worry about funding the inventory. And then she had a tunic that was relatively inexpensive to make. It was a high margin item. And she was those items became cash cows, and those items funded the entire business. So, technically, I think she started with about $5 million, but, in my world, that's actually not that much money. If you are losing money, you can burn through that pretty quickly. Kendra Scott, another business I was involved with, I'm still an investor in, is a jewelry business. She started with $300. Okay, the great thing about the jewelry business is the margins are insane. Okay, her initial margins, her cost of goods is about 10% of her selling price. So when you're doing that, you don't need a lot of years with $300 before you have a hefty amount of money in the bank. Okay, I'm going quickly because we don't have much time. Now I'll tell you the 10 lessons of my life. This has nothing to do with business. Number 1, life is self-fulfilling. I had the most amazing mother, and she taught me that I could do absolutely whatever. She made me believe that I was capable of doing whatever I believed I wanted to do. If I wanted to be an astronaut, president, or whatever. And it's amazing. If you think things can happen, of course you have to have a plan. It just doesn't mysteriously happen. But if you believe in something and you are kind of relentless about achieving it, 9 times out of 10 you can make it happen. So I always say, if you don't know where you're going, you're not going to get there. You have to have a vision. It's amazing to me how few people have vision. Okay, passion is power. That's number 2. I love to be around people who are passionate, and the will to succeed and just an intense desire counts for a lot. Nothing is more frustrating than people who aren't passionate. And honestly, if someone's not passionate about what they're doing, they shouldn't do it. Life is too short. Number 3, never accept no. I worked for a guy named Marvin Traub, who was a genius. He's the first kind of major boss that I had. And I remember, I was probably 5 years into working for him, and there was this woman that I wanted to hire, and she turned me down. And I remember calling him like on Friday night, and her name was Judy Daniel, and I said, Judy's not going to join. And he said, don't accept that. Make her join. And I'm like, how the hell am I going to do that? He's like, I don't care, just do it. And I did it. And she ended up being like my most important employee, and I'm still friends with her, 25 years later. You don't accept no. When I look to make investments in people, I invest in relentlessness, in people who just won't accept no for an answer. Okay. No such thing as a bad decision, okay? I find a lot of people get paralyzed by perfection. There's the saying, perfection's the enemy of good. Just what you gain in making a decision quickly, and I'm not talking about if this was a nuclear plant, okay? I'm going to go slow with that. But but most of the decisions in business are not life and death decisions. We're not heart surgeons. What you gain by making a fast decision, if you are wrong, you pivot, you adjust. But you gain so much by being quick. So don't overthink. Relentlessness. I had a trainer years ago. I'm a horseback rider. I know I don't look it now, but I used to be a lot thinner. You've got to be relentless. I guess in a way, this is another way of saying don't say no. But in a business, you've got to, in the early days with Anthropologie, I'm telling you, I worked 7 days a week or 6.5 days a week. There wasn't a detail that I wasn't involved with. I just drove and drove and drove the business to excellence. And that's what you need. And that's what, especially in a young business, but quite frankly, also in a more mature business. Okay, another lesson, this was a guy, I learned this from a guy named Victor, another one of my horse trainers. If you look where you're going, it's like driving, you're gonna get there. If you don't look where you're going, you're not gonna get there. You have to understand where you're going. I said a few minutes ago, if people don't start, it's amazing. I just sat down with a 3-year plan for Boden. And there were 20 people in the room, and they had the finance guys presenting the spreadsheet, and we're planning this up 2% and this up 3.7%, and we're going to grow this and that. Everything was iterative, and I'm like, wait a minute, take a breath, guys. Where do you want the business to be in 3 years? No one's talking about. They're talking about this is going to go up 3%, inflation, and this and that. It's like, who do you want to be? You have to start with a vision. Okay, profit is a proxy for popularity. Okay, I got that a little bit before. I never, and I'm a little unique this way, I never start with profit. I always start with popularity. Because trust me, if people love you, you're going to make money. Perfect is the enemy of progress. That kind of goes back to, no such thing as a bad decision. Another horseback training. I learned a lot from riding. My last trainer, he always told me, you just go with it and you adjust as it's happening. You just kind of have to sometimes let things happen and adjust rather than trying to ram it to be perfect, because that's never going to happen. Okay, and lastly, the power of pull. And by that I mean, especially as a leader, you have to make yourself so valuable to people that they pull you, that they want your help, that they include you. It's not about pushing yourself on people. It's about being such a strong mentor and such a good teacher and so valuable to them that they include you. And I encourage employees that I work with to work that way. It's not about forcing yourself on people. It's about serving other people. Anyway, sorry to run through this so quickly. I don't know what time is, but, and I'm not in a rush if you have questions. I actually did that quickly. So what are your questions or comments or concerns, or what do you think I got right? What do you think I got wrong?
I'm fascinated by the Anthropologie thing. It's a genuinely different brand.
Yeah.
But so many people aspire. And I sort of think about more of the Marks and Spencers or M&S.
Yeah.
Desperately trying to find something different and failing, really,
Yeah.
in a kind of clothing sense. And I just wonder that the buyer, whoever, because I get taken into Anthropologie quite often, but it is a really good experience.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
full of admiration there. But I just wonder how the quality of the products, but actually the products themselves, I sort of don't see them anywhere else.
Yeah.
I think that makes it unique, and it just feels quite fragile in a sense. So I just wonder how fragile it really is, because if you get the product wrong, you're screwed. And I just wonder how you manage to get that kind of those buying decisions in the products.
I mean, that's a great question, and again, I could probably spend a week talking about that. But what I would tell you, I spent the first 10 years of my life in a department store. So I had an undergraduate degree in computer science, mathematics, psychology, art, and theater. So I'm a left brain, right brain guy. Then I went to business school and studied marketing and finance. And after business school, I was one of the few people at a business school to want to go into retailing. And very few retailers hired MBAs. And I was insistent, and it's a long story, but I ended up at Bloomingdale's, which was kind of like the Selfridges of America. But also, it was a time when the world of department stores were changing. It was the beginning. It was in the early '80s. It was the beginning of big box retailing, so like B&Q. So basically, people who kind of category experts who came in at a really sharp price. And it was also the beginning of specialty stores, so more like typical high street retailers, like Next or I don't know, River Island. And they were coming after the department stores. So I joined the department store world at the peak, and by the time I exited, in 10 years later, they were getting a lot of pressure from a lot of different angles. And the thing that I didn't like about the department stores is they didn't put the customer first. And also, I didn't think they focused on the back end of the business. So they spent a lot of money on kind of marketing the business, so telling the customer how great they were, but they overpromised and underdelivered. And so I became disenfranchised, and I ended up coming to England and working for Habitat. And that was at a time when Habitat was known as Shabitat. And Terrence Conrad was losing control of the parent company, Storehouse. And it ended up getting taken over by an accountant and a management consultant, Michael Julian and Michael Harvey. Great guys, but they knew nothing about retail. And it was so frustrating for me because I knew what had to happen, and they were supportive of me, but it was me against 100 people, other people that they hired who had like no idea because they hired a lot of people in their own image. Then I came back to America. I'd gone on exactly 2 interviews when I left Bloomingdale's. One was with Habitat and one was with Williams-Sonoma. I came back to America to work for Williams-Sonoma, and I had a problem with the culture of the company. I wasn't very good about doing due diligence in terms of where I wanted to work. I was terrible at it. So pretty quickly, after maybe 6 months, the culture was toxic. It was the kind of a dishonest culture. So I thought to myself, I'm going to start my own business because I'm tired of working for other people, and I want to build a business that has an honest relationship with the customer, that really celebrates creativity, and so on. And that's how I got to Anthropologie. I was actually in the process of starting my own business. I was terrible at raising money, and Dick, who founded Urban Outfitters, which is the parent company of Anthropologie, started as an investor of mine, and then he ended up saying, if I can't manage Anthropologie, I'm managing Urban. If you come and do Anthropologie, I'll give you a part of the business, and that's what happened. So I didn't quite start it, but I basically built it from nothing. And I did it because I love the culture of the company. It was highly entrepreneurial. It was a real balance between creativity and commerce. So the company, Dick, really understood the value of creative people, of artists and designers. He also was, I'd say, very customer focused, and you had to be to run a brand like Urban Outfitters because Dick at that time was in his 50s. The target customer for Urban was kind of 18 to 25. So and that customer has a very strong point of view, and if you tell that customer what you think they're going to do, they're going to say fuck you. You have to know that customer. So that's kind of why I joined the business, and it was a very personal experience. I had a strong point of view about the kind of people I wanted to work with and how I wanted to serve the customer. And I always felt that I would never offer the customer something that I wouldn't want my friend to have. When I love to sell, nothing, there are very few things that I enjoy more than being in a store selling people, because I like taking care of people. It's a way for me to express my feelings for humanity. I love making a woman feel beautiful. And it was never for me, and we had 18,000 employees, and they all learned this. It was never about making the sale. It was about making someone look amazing. Because if you make someone look amazing, they're going to become your best salespeople. We kind of built the business, this was before social media, one customer at a time, doing business that way. The business, it was not easy to run. It was pretty complex, but we were able to use the systems to kind of put the creative people, to create guardrails for the creative people. So we let people be creative, but we measured it. And we gave them that feedback, so they understood, what worked and what didn't work. I'd say one of my attitudes towards business is you want to spend about 50% of your resource on the knowable. So in the fashion world, you want to take what you sold last year and maybe repeat about 50%. You want to take about 35% of what you're doing on the last 6 weeks trend, and then you want to take about 15% on the crazy stuff. Most retailers don't do the crazy stuff. Most retailers, I have a saying, when you look in a rearview mirror too often, you get in a car accident. Most retailers are always looking, at what they did last year or what the competition is doing. We were aware of what the competition was doing, but we never wanted to look like the competition. We wanted to look like us. We had to be aware of what they're doing so we understood what the customer was seeing, but not so that we knew what to do. I don't know if that gives you clarity, but it was very strong measurement. And the inventory, I would say, was controlled like the military. It came in exactly on the day it was supposed to come in, and it left when it was supposed to leave. And if it didn't leave, you take a markdown. And the reason why that's important in a retail store, the composition of the inventory, it's part of the visual experience for the customer, and if it gets imbalanced, it's not a good experience. So you need very strong inventory controls. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Especially looking forward, man.
Okay. Yes.
What's your view on the future of the high street?
That's a great question. I personally find most high street retailers mind-numbing. The visual experience, they all look the same, they all sell the same product, they all, everything's always on markdown, which for me denigrates the experience. They have no customer service, no real customer service. So I think it's a problem. But I actually think brick and mortar retail is an exciting place to be, because I think if you do it differently and better, I'm on the board of a business called Aritzia, which is based in Vancouver, and Aritzia has about 100 stores. Their business was up 65% last quarter, okay? It's an amazing experience. The average Aritzia store manager probably earns twice what most high street store managers earn. The staff probably earns an average of $30 an hour in the store, whereas staff in most high street stores earn $10 an hour. Because Brian, the CEO and founder, he understands how to be kind of the servant to the customer. And if you want to take care of customers, you can't have idiots taking care of customers. You need people with judgment, and you need people who care. And you're not going to get people with judgment who care for $10 an hour. But he's smart enough to make the money in other ways to pay for that. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity for retail, but not traditional high street retail. Yes, you had a question.
I was going to ask a similar question.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Neil, go ahead. All right.
At the 15% thing, because I kind of quite like the idea of, at the 15%, you can afford to lose it.
Right.
But if you get a winner, you're absolutely through the stars.
That's right. Yeah. The reality is, the best sellers always come from the 15%. And very few people are prescient. There are very few Steve Jobs in this world that, who knew, and I don't know if, I didn't know him, so I don't know if he had a vision for how big the iPhone could be. But, it's a lot easier to have a hunch and to test it and to quickly react, either build on that hunch or get rid of it. And honestly, I didn't come up with this idea. I learned this from Marvin Trout, my first boss at Bloomingdale's. They had a department called the Paradox Department. And the way it works in apparel, usually the trends usually start at the very high level or on the street. Okay? And back then, 25, 30 years ago, they usually started at the designer level because there was no street fashion back then. And so the Paradox buyer had no financial responsibility. All she had to do was identify what's next. And the minute something came into the shop and it sold, it came out of the Paradox department and it went into a main department. And it got managed by someone who maybe wasn't as good at identifying what's next, but once the what's next was in front of her, could build it, okay? My husband, Keith, is like a Paradox buyer, okay? Keith is one of the most talented people I know. He can't add 2 + 2. He doesn't drive. He doesn't keep a calendar, okay? I mean, he's an artist, and he is in his own world. I love his world. Okay, but because he's not focused on the things that I focus on, he sees the world differently. And I would say the success at Anthropologie, we had a lot of Keiths, okay, and we had a system where they could flourish, and we also kept them from going off the cliff. And that kind of 50, 35, 15 system, and it's not there's flexibility. In some areas, it might be 60, 20, 20, but roughly it's 50, 35, 15. That's what allows those creative people to flourish. Okay, Seb.
The woman you wanted to hire, I've forgotten her name.
Judy.
Judy.
Yeah.
How did you know she was great, and how did you get her to say yes?
Okay, so good question. I would say...
That was in a business context.
Yeah, okay. How I knew she was great back then was probably not as empirical as how I would know it today.
Yeah.
Okay, I just did 2 major hires for Boden.
Okay.
Okay, and I would say what I did was I created a scorecard for what I need in that job. And that scorecard is, some basic fundamental things like, is there going to be a cultural fit between the employee and the because every company has a different culture. And aggressive people might work in one company, it might not work in another company. If a company has a founder, it takes a certain kind of person to work well with a founder. If a company's bigger and you need someone more process-oriented and so on. So what's the cultural fit? What's the skill set? What does it take, for whatever job you're filling, for that person to, you can't have a head of production who doesn't know, factories around the world or hasn't, gone through this. So, I would say a mistake that I made earlier in my career was, and a mistake I see a lot of private equity people make is they hire athletes. And athletes are usually people who went to good schools and they're very smart and so on. But a lot of times they don't know what the fuck they're doing. And they can get you into a lot of trouble. So a lot of times, there's a saying, I use the saying linchpins. A lot of times you can get someone who maybe isn't, going to run the company, but who knows how to do, the job. And a company, you need to have a blend of kind of high potentials, athletes, and linchpins who actually know how to get stuff done. So you have to understand what it is you're hiring. And then you have to evaluate it. I also, I'm maniacal about reference checks now, and I don't just speak to the people that the potential employee gives me. I do a deep dive because you learn a lot about people from, if you spend, 6, 8, 10 hours really digging into their career. Now, how did I get Judy to join? I basically said, I'm not going to accept no. And I don't think we actually gave her that much more money. We probably gave her a little bit more money. But people, at the end of the day, work for people. They don't work for money. You have to compensate them fairly. But you have to convince them they work for respect. They work because they like to work at a company where they can have an impact, at least the kind of people I like to hire. And you just have to say to them, I'm going to be there for you. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to make this the most amazing job, you'll ever have in your lifetime. You just have to say no. You just can't accept no.
Got it.
Yeah, and not a lot of people do that. So when you do that, you can usually win. Yes, Chris?
I'm just following on after Sam's question. We worked together for a bit and we found that evaluating markets was, in terms of the size of the market, the growth of the market, the price sensitivity, could you make good margins in it, etc., were relatively easy to do. Evaluating people was a much harder job for consultants and others. So in your business life, what has been the biggest obstacle to success? Has it been the market or the people around you?
That's a great question. I'd have to think about it, but I think my biggest obstacle to success is me sometimes. I think you got to have capital, okay? Look at what we're going through now, right? It's like everything that could possibly go wrong in the world is going wrong. And, very few, there are going to be some businesses that are quite good, but most people are going to really have a lot of pressure now. And you have to have capital on the balance sheet so you can get through this. But putting capital aside, the most important thing is people. And, hiring the right people and building the right culture. And I don't remember this guy's name, but many, many years ago, he taught me about how birds migrate in America from the East Coast to the West Coast every winter. Okay, they go in formations. So there might be 150 birds that fly together, and usually, and you've probably seen this, they go in a V-shaped formation, right? And the bird in the front is the one who's kind of breaking the wind. And he has or she has the hardest job. And by the time you get to the end of the V formation, the last few birds basically just sit there with their wings out and enjoy the ride because they're getting pulled by those 150 birds. And as those birds go from east to west, they rotate through the V formation. So the front bird goes to the end, so he or she gets to rest, and the next go up and so on. And the illustration was to illustrate the value of people working together. And when a company works together, honestly, probably a lot of you in this room have seen this, but I've seen this. People can accomplish anything when they work together. So, and of course, great people can accomplish more when they work together than average people can when they work together. So, your job is to hire great people who have appropriate experience, who are a cultural fit, And then as a leader, you have to inspire them. You have to create a culture where there's diversity of opinion, but at the end of the day, people come out marching in one direction. And it's hard, and I think the more you do it, the better you get at it. I think measurement's really important, because if you don't measure it, you're not going to improve. So that was one of the things I learned from Google. They measure everything, as you can imagine, and including the people who evaluate people. So they identified who is the best judge of character and who's not. I'm sure in your own life, I know your wife is, I think she's an amazing judge of people. And she probably, you're not, Claire? And, I would guess you are. I never asked you about that. But some people just have a quick instinct, and then they know where to dig. And some people are just always wrong. And, and those people may be great employees, you just don't want them in the hiring process. Yes?
So I think a lot of female-focused retailing is really reliant on overconsumption from their female customers. How do you think, as the customer starts to focus on sustainability, the fashion sector will react to that?
Yeah, I think today's customer, I think it's very important in the business to understand the kind of the psyche of the customer you're going after, right? So it depends upon if you're going after, actually I think all people care about sustainability now in the world, but probably the ones who are most passionate about it are the younger ones. So you have to be aware of what your customers value, and I think that's a big thing in the world of apparel is, where things are made. The fast fashion is definitely downtrending. I even worry about social media. I think it's, it causes so many issues. Whoops, sorry. There we go. I worry about social media, and and I think as a consumer expert, I look at this stuff all the time. One of the hottest growing categories is secondhand clothing. So I think, the one thing I'll tell you in the business is that change is always good. First of all, change is always going to happen. As Einstein said, the only thing that's constant is change. So you have to embrace change. You can't be resistant to it. And you can, those people that understand the change that's happening and adapt the best are the ones who are going to make money. So I'd say go after secondhand clothing, go after sustainable clothing. In my experience, people don't buy based on sustainability alone. The clothing has to be beautiful. But if you have two brands, one that's, has genuine, ESG, and one that doesn't, they're going to buy from the brand that has ESG. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. What else? Yes.
Can I just ask you about Anthropologie isn't cheap, and I know that it's okay because the product's fantastic. It feels like in small businesses, which lots of us probably are in, there's constant drive to do things for less, undervalue ourselves, and I just wonder if you got a word of wisdom to get us to all stop.
Well, I think the way you fight that is by building your brand and building your point of difference. And it takes discipline, but you have to say no. You have to try to say no. Now, you also have to be pragmatic. It goes back to the capital. If you had a lot of capital in the bank, when I first ran David Yurman, when I got there, they had gotten into a rhythm of discounting. And David Yurman is a fairly expensive luxury jewelry brand, and you don't want to discount ever a luxury brand. So we just stopped it, and it cost us like $20 million in revenue that first year that we stopped it. So we had to be able to weather that. But then the brand actually got stronger. The next year, when people realized they weren't going to get a discount, they loved the product, so they bought it anyway. Now, David Yurman had great product and a strong brand. So you can't do that without great product and a strong brand. We used to say at Anthropologie, what you pay for something should have nothing to do with what you charge for it. And a lot of times, if you're really lucky, you might buy something for $5, and then you'd look at it and you'd say that we could sell this for $150. And first of all, you can get into the thing, is it fair, is it not fair, or whatever. It kind of doesn't matter, because it's not like you're doing that across the board. But why not take the $150? And sometimes we used to say trick them, because if you charge more, they like it more. They think it's worth more. We talked about the iPhone. I mean, what do you think an Hermes bag? Who knows how much a Birkin bag costs?
At retail?
Yeah. How much?
£10,000?
Probably the cheapest Birkin you can get is probably 12 or 15,000 at this point. You can spend 100,000 for a Birkin bag, and that $10,000 or $12,000 Birkin bag probably is $1,000, maybe $800 to make, maybe less. Okay, I mean, I have to say, I don't live on a budget. I don't go near an Hermes store. The prices are so obscene, it drives me, it frightens the crap out of me. But in fact, I just read this morning, they were just up 24%. I think it's maybe an $8 billion business now, and they make about 35% profit. 35% profit they make. So, but it takes an unbelievable discipline to do that, and a long-term view, and then you do need to have, deep enough pockets to say no to people. Saying no, by the way, is important. And that might be part of what you're getting to. When you're small and you need that revenue, your tendency is to say yes to everybody.
That's very true.
Yeah, and good business says no all the time. I'm not going to sell this because it's not good enough, for my brand to sell. I'm not going to sell to that customer because, they don't respect the business, they don't value it, they're not going to pay the bills or whatever. And, think about yourself, the brands that you value the most, they're probably the ones that have a level of exclusivity to them that, that do say no. Anything else?
I've got one.
Go ahead.
I know you very well.
Yeah.
Your personal time disciplines are remarkable. What is your trick to being so on top of something?
I'm half German. So, I mean, it's true.
Yeah.
I read a great book in business school called 1 Minute Manager.
Yeah.
And if, I haven't read it in years, but I think it's still good. And it basically, 1 Minute Manager, said, it's a good question. It's about prioritization. Okay, you have to spend the time on the things that have the biggest impact, and you have to be willing to ignore things that don't have impact. And then you need to be able to compartmentalize your life a bit and your time, so that you can go 150 miles an hour answering emails or whatever. But when you're present with a loved one or in a meeting, you got to put the phone down and be present. And you have to say no. Because particularly as you get older and as you become well known in the industry, everyone wants your time, and you have to give your time to the people that are going to use it the best. So you have to discriminate, and don't waste time. And only do what you want. I mean, if I love an employee, I will, if I think they, are committed to the organization and they have potential to learn and they care and all of that, I'll go to dinner with them, I'll do whatever it takes. But if I think someone's average or isn't committing time, honestly, they don't exist for me. I just, I'll let someone else deal with it. You have to be ruthless. Same thing with inventory. If I see something that customers want, I'll be all over it. If I bought, 100 pounds worth, I'll buy 1,000,000 pounds worth the next time. But if I see something that's not getting a reaction, get out of it. Don't invest good money after bad.